Behind the glamour of Hollywood's golden age was a hidden world of secrets, lies, and forbidden relationships. The studios built perfect public images for their stars-devoted couples. Pure young actresses and honorable family men, but the truth was often very different. Nowhere was this deception more painful than in the lives of children born from these secret affairs. Their existence threatened careers, destroyed reputations, and exposed the hypocrisy of an industry built on illusion. Many of these children grew up believing elaborate lies about their origins, living in emotional isolation, or suffering from the pain of being hidden in plain sight. The story begins with perhaps the most famous of Hollywood's secret children, a daughter whose very existence was concealed for decades through an elaborate deception that reached shocking lengths to hide her true identity even from herself. Judy Lewis was the hidden daughter of actress Loretta Young and movie legend Clark Gable. In 1935, Young, a devout Catholic, and Gable, who was married at the time, starred together in The Call of the Wild. During the filming, they began an affair that led to Young becoming pregnant, a situation that could have destroyed both of their careers in an era when studios enforced strict morality clauses to protect herself and her child. Young came up with a drastic plan. She disappeared from the public eye, secretly gave birth to her daughter, Judy, and then, 19 months later, adopted her own biological child through a Catholic orphanage. The world believed she had simply adopted a baby girl, but the truth was far more complicated. Gable never publicly acknowledged Judy, and Young maintained the lie for decades. One of the most heartbreaking details of this story was how far Young went to hide her daughter's resemblance to Gable. The actor was famous for his large ears, a trait Judy inherited, to conceal the resemblance. Loretta reportedly arranged for Judy to have her ears surgically pinned back when she was still a child. The surgery wasn't for medical reasons, but purely to hide her connection to her real father. Judy grew up surrounded by fame and wealth, but deep down she felt something was wrong. She never fully understood why her family seemed to keep secrets from her. It wasn't until her 30s that she discovered the truth, not from her parents, but from a magazine article hinting that Clark Gable was her real father. In Hollywood, it had been an open secret. Almost everyone knew, except Judy herself. When she confronted Loretta Young, her mother tearfully admitted the truth. Clark Gable had already died in 1960 without ever forming a relationship with his daughter. Judy later wrote a memoir titled Uncommon Knowledge, describing her emotional journey to uncover the truth. Loretta never publicly acknowledged the story during her lifetime. Even decades later, when social attitudes toward children born out of wedlock had softened, the shame and secrecy had become too deeply rooted. Judy Lewis's story shows how far Hollywood stars would go to protect their public image, and how devastating those lies could be for the children caught in the middle. She was born from love between two famous people, but spent most of her life as a secret. Her very existence considered too scandalous for Hollywood's carefully managed image. Marlon Brando, another Hollywood legend, had a very different kind of secret family story. His talent transformed film acting forever, but behind his artistic brilliance was chaos. Brando's personal life was full of affairs, marriages, and children, some acknowledged, others hidden. He fathered at least 11 children, though the exact number may never be known. Brando's approach to fatherhood was as unpredictable as his life. Some of his children he embraced. Others he ignored or kept secret for years. The result was a family marked by pain and confusion. His son Christian Brando shot and killed his half-sister Cheyenne's boyfriend in 1990. Years later, Cheyenne took her own life after a long struggle with mental illness. These were not just tabloid tragedies, but the outcome of years of emotional turmoil and neglect. After Brando's death in 2004, more people came forward, claiming to be his unacknowledged children. Some had been raised without knowing their famous father. Others knew privately, but were hidden from the public. Brando's inconsistency as a parent meant that some of his children grew up with love and attention, while others felt abandoned. He once said, "If you're not there for your children, you're not really a parent." By his own words, he often failed to live up to that standard. Though he had deep insight into human emotion on screen, he struggled to apply it in real life, especially as a father. For many of Brando's children, having a famous father meant very little if he was never truly present. They grew up chasing the shadow of a myth rather than a man. His legacy as an actor is undeniable. But the emotional cost to his family was immense. Bobby Darin's story was different, but just as tragic. Before becoming one of America's most popular entertainers, with hits like Mac, The Knife, and Splish Splash, he lived under a painful lie about his own identity. Bobby grew up believing his grandmother was his mother and his real mother was his sister. Born Walden, Robert Casoto, in 1936 to a teenage mother, Nina Casoto, Bobby's family created the lie to avoid the stigma of an unwed pregnancy. For years, he had no idea about his true parentage. He only found out as an adult after he had already become a star. The truth came out during an argument, when his aunt Actually, his sister, revealed the secret. The discovery shattered him. Imagine learning in adulthood that your entire family story was built on a lie. Friends said the revelation deeply affected his mental state. After discovering the truth, Bobby became more introspective. He started writing folk music, got involved in political causes, and began to question who he really was. The emotional damage, however, never fully healed. He died young, at just 37, still struggling to understand his own identity. His story shows how family secrets, even those meant to protect, can cause deep emotional harm. The lie may have spared his mother public shame, but it left her son confused and broken inside. Another complicated case came decades later with actress Patty Duke and her son, Sean Astin. In 1971, 17-year-old Duke gave birth to a baby boy, but she wasn't sure who the father was. At the time, she was struggling with undiagnosed bipolar disorder and had relationships with several men in a short period. One possible father was Desi Arnaz Jr., son of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who had briefly dated Duke. Another was Michael Tell, a man Duke impulsively married for just 13 days. Years later, she married actor John Astin, who adopted her son and gave him his last name. For years, Sean believed John Astin was his biological father. The press had a field day with the mystery, speculating endlessly about who his real father was. Duke herself didn't know for sure. It wasn't until Sean was in his 20s that DNA testing finally gave a clear answer. Michael Tell was his biological father. Despite the confusion, Sean grew up with 3 men he could call dad, the one who raised him, the one rumored to be his father, and the one who actually was. Sean has often said that he feels lucky to have all 3 in his life. His story is one of rare peace and acceptance in a world where secrets like this often end in pain. Then there was Charlie Chaplin, the man who brought laughter to millions but found himself in one of Hollywood's biggest paternity scandals. In 1943, actress Joan Barry claimed that Chaplin was the father of her daughter, Carol Ann. Blood tests showed he was not, but the court refused to accept that evidence at the time. The jury ruled that Chaplin still had to pay child support, even though science said he wasn't the father. The case turned into a public spectacle. Chaplin's reputation, already controversial because of his politics and his relationships with younger women, suffered greatly. He eventually left the United States, partly because of the scandal. For Carol Ann Barry, the outcome was heartbreaking. She grew up as the legal daughter of a man who publicly denied her. She became the innocent victim of a battle between fame, pride, and outdated laws. Finally, there's the case of Joan Crawford. To the public, she was the image of a glamorous and loving mother who adopted 4 children and built a perfect family. But behind closed doors, things were very different. Her daughter Christina later wrote the book Mommy Dearest, claiming that Crawford was abusive and adopted her children more for publicity than love. She alleged that some of the adoptions weren't even legal, arranged instead through private deals to maintain Crawford's image as a caring mother. Her other children defended Joan, saying she was strict but loving. The truth remains unclear. But whether Crawford's motives were pure or not, the result was a deeply divided family and a legacy stained by controversy. These stories reveal the darker side of Hollywood's golden image. Behind the cameras and the smiles were secrets that destroyed families, identities, and lives. The stars shone brightly on screen, but in their private worlds, shadows loomed, shadows their children were forced to live in for the rest of their lives. Clark Gable's son, John Clark Gable, was conceived shortly before the actor's death and born months after, becoming a posthumous reminder of Hollywood's king, Gable's 5th wife. Case Spreckels, who had once worked as a waitress, was pregnant when Gable suffered a fatal heart attack in November 1960. He died without ever meeting his only legitimate child, who was born 4 months later. This tragic timing meant that John grew up with a father who existed only in films and photographs, a global icon who had no chance to hold or guide him. His absence was not the result of rejection or secrecy, but the cruel timing of death. There were long-standing rumors that Gable had another child earlier in life, a daughter named Judy Lewis, whom he never acknowledged. Judy grew up believing Gable was just a distant figure. The difference between Gable's two biological children is striking, one denied and hidden away. The other recognized but never met. John Clark Gable grew up surrounded by his father's legacy, but without the man himself. This created both emotional and practical challenges as he tried to form his own identity. A family therapist once said that growing up as Clark Gable's son without ever knowing him created a unique version of the celebrity child syndrome. John had to make sense of a father who was everywhere in the public eye but completely absent in his personal life. His inheritance was both material and symbolic, but it lacked a real relationship. Despite these challenges, John built his own path, appearing in a few films but mainly focusing on business and auto racing, far from the Hollywood spotlight. Over time, his relationship with his father's legacy evolved from something heavy to something he could accept as part of who he is. In interviews, John has spoken about finding peace with being Clark Gable's son while establishing his own identity. Unlike his half-sister Judy, he never had to question his parentage or feel unwanted. His challenge was different, learning how to relate to a father who existed only in memories and movies. His story represents another kind of Hollywood secret child, one who wasn't hidden or denied, yet still grew up without a father's presence. It shows how even acknowledged children of celebrities face their own struggles in creating independent identities under the shadow of fame. Errol Flynn's story, on the other hand, takes a darker turn. The actor's swashbuckling image in the 1930s and 1940s masked behavior that led to one of Hollywood's most notorious scandals, and possibly a secret child. Flynn was tried in the 1940s for statutory assault involving 2 teenage girls. Although acquitted, the trial exposed his relationships with underage girls and tarnished his image forever. Beyond the trial, rumors circulated about other young women he had relationships with, some claiming to have had his child. One woman later said she gave birth to his daughter but kept it secret to avoid scandal. Flynn never acknowledged such a child, and the story was buried for years. If true, this case represents one of the more disturbing examples of Hollywood's hidden offspring, not concealed to protect a career, but to cover up something potentially criminal. The child, if she existed, grew up unaware of her father's identity. a secret kept to protect both her mother and Flynn's reputation. A psychologist once said that discovering your father is a famous figure. Like Errol Flynn, can be profoundly disorienting. A person spends their life as an ordinary individual, only to learn they are connected to a legend whose reputation is complicated and controversial. Flynn's rumored unacknowledged child highlights how the power dynamics of Hollywood often left vulnerable people, especially children, to suffer the consequences. Charlie Chaplin's story shows a different version of this theme. His marriage to Una O'Neill, daughter of playwright Eugene O'Neill, shocked the world because of their 36-year age gap. Despite the criticism, their relationship lasted, producing 8 children. These children were not hidden, but they grew up under the immense shadow of their father's fame. Chaplin was in his mid-50s when his first child with Una was born, and in his 70s when his last arrived. By the time he died at 88, some of his children were still very young. Growing up in Switzerland after Chaplin's exile from America, they lived in an isolated world centered around an aging genius. One daughter, Victoria, left home at 18 to escape the pressure of her father's fame and went on to co-found a successful circus company. Others pursued art, acting, or music, while some struggled with mental health issues. A psychologist noted that these children faced unusual challenges. Their father was already elderly, his greatest achievements long behind him, and his fame an ever-present weight, although acknowledged and loved. Chaplin's younger children still face the burden of being defined by his name. Their story shows that even open acknowledgement cannot protect celebrity children from the pressures of fame or the expectations that come with it. Lana Turner's daughter, Cheryl Crane, wasn't hidden from the public either, but her life became part of one of Hollywood's most shocking scandals. In 1958, 14-year-old Cheryl stabbed her mother's mobster boyfriend, Johnny Stompanato, to death during a violent argument. The killing was ruled self-defense, but the case rocked Hollywood and nearly ended Turner's career. Behind Turner's glamorous image was a life of abuse and fear. Stompanato had been physically violent, creating a household filled with terror. Some rumors even claimed that Turner herself killed him and that Cheryl took the blame. Though no evidence ever supported that, the emotional impact on both mother and daughter was lifelong. Cheryl struggled for years with trauma, substance abuse, and mental health challenges. As an adult, she eventually built a stable life as a real estate agent and writer. Her story reveals how the children of celebrities can become collateral damage in their parents' turbulent lives. Ingrid Bergman's case involved not violence, but scandal. Her affair with Italian director Roberto Rossellini shocked the world. She became pregnant while still married to another man, and when her son Roberto was born, Hollywood turned against her. Her wholesome image from films like Casablanca made the affair seem even more shocking to the American public. She was denounced in Congress as a bad moral influence, blacklisted by Hollywood, and unable to find work for years. Bergman eventually married Rossellini and had twin daughters, including future actress Isabella Rossellini. She refused to hide her son or apologize for her choices, even as it cost her career. Her later comeback, winning an Oscar for Anastasia in 1956, marked a major shift in how Hollywood treated personal scandals. Her story helped change attitudes toward celebrities' private lives, paving the way for greater acceptance of personal freedom. It also showed how children born from controversy could become symbols in cultural battles over morality and fame. Eddie Fisher's story brings a more personal kind of tragedy. Known for his smooth voice and charm, he was once married to Debbie Reynolds, then famously left her for Elizabeth Taylor. The scandal filled headlines, but behind the gossip were his children, Carrie and Todd Fisher, who grew up feeling abandoned. Carrie later became famous as Princess Leia in Star Wars, and often spoke about her father's emotional absence. Todd described him as a man more interested in romance and fame than fatherhood. Fisher wasn't a secretive parent. He was simply unavailable, caught up in his own chaotic life. His story shows another side of Hollywood parenthood, one where children were acknowledged but still left to deal with emotional neglect. Fame doesn't just hide children. Sometimes it swallows the parents whole. Frank Sinatra Jr.'s life closed out this pattern in a different way. Unlike many Hollywood children, he was never hidden or denied. But being Frank Sinatra's son came with its own unique hardships. At 19, Frank Jr. was kidnapped and held for ransom. Though rescued unharmed, the event made worldwide news and followed him for life. Some even accused the family of staging the kidnapping for publicity, though the FBI confirmed it was real later. Frank Jr. tried to follow in his father's footsteps as a singer, but he could never escape comparisons. Working as his father's musical director, he lived both as a son and as an employee. Constantly under scrutiny, he once said, "I was born with a famous name. I wasn't born with a famous voice." That single line summed up his lifelong struggle to make his own. Mark, while living in the shadow of one of the most iconic entertainers in history, his story shows that even when children are publicly embraced, they can still suffer under the weight of legacy and expectation. Fame doesn't only create secrets, it also creates impossible standards. Across these stories, one truth stands out, whether hidden, denied, or openly acknowledged. The children of Hollywood's golden age often carried invisible scars. Their lives were shaped by fame they didn't choose and legacies they could never escape. Behind every glamorous photograph was a family trying to survive the cost of celebrity.